Well, it's going to be another hot day, which probably means everyone's ACs will be running, and everyone will not be looking forward to opening up that LP&L bill when it comes in the mail. And I say that to introduce from LP&L. I'm sure you're happy for that one, right?
I appreciate that.
It's Matt Rose, Public Affairs and Government Relations Manager with LP&L.
Yep.
Matt Rose. Hey, thanks for stopping by today.
No, thank you for having me. And yeah, the good news is before coming on here, I was taking a look at the weather, and it does look like it's going to trend down over the next week or so.
Yeah.
And I hope that's the case. It looks like it's going to be in the 80s for 4 or 5 days, and that should have a pretty good impact on folks' bills. And so I think that's a welcome relief for everybody, including folks that need the water for watering the lawns and things like that. So that's good news coming up this next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about LP&L and the rates and the summertime bills, because
sure.
Every year people are upset at LP&L, and that normally occurs in the summer months. You don't hear much about LP&L in February and March. You hear about it in the summer. And there's a petition now that I think has 12,000 signatures or so. So talk a little bit about why everyone's rates and everyone's bills, I guess,
sure.
more than the rates, but why does everyone's bills seem to be very, very high this summer? Sure.
And you make a really good point as you kind of walk through it in terms of, talking about cost, because for LP&L or for, city departments like the water department, stormwater, solid waste and those folks, we talk a lot about rates, but the thing that we always need to remember is that, for most customers out there, customers a lot of times, they don't pay a rate, they pay a bill. And so you need to focus on the cost. How is this actually impacting them? And so, what we try to do is we try to get out there in the spring months, because we know that every single year we're going to see our customers' bill on the electric side, LP&L Electric, that we're kind of solely responsible for in terms of setting the rate. We're going to see folks' bills double and triple as we go into the summertime months, because across the state of Texas, we know what the summer temperature is going to be like, and we know that customer consumption is going to double or even triple in some cases as you go from May to June to July. And so I try to get out there and talk to folks about the impact that weather has on that factor. But certainly over the last 4 years, we've been talking a lot about rates at LP&L. And the reason that we've been talking a lot about rates is because we've had to go through a program where we've had to adjust up our base rate. And so, one of the things I want folks to know about our rate is that it's split up into two pieces. You have what we call our base rate, or what's listed on folks' bills as the energy charge. And the base rate makes up about 30% of your total rate. And the easiest way to think about your base rate is that this is going to be the rate that's going to cover all of our budgeted expenses. Anything throughout the year that's in our budget that gets passed by our board and council, including our long-term infrastructure programs, are going to be housed on that base rate. And it makes up 30% of the rate, because that's 30% of our total cost. The other 70% of our rate is what's called the purchase power recovery factor, or as I refer to it, the pass-through. And that's going to be our cost of purchasing wholesale power from XL Energy. And since 2004, we've been on a full requirements contract with them, which means we buy 100% of our power from them. And that purchase power recovery factor is really made up of the cost to make the power, the cost to transmit the power, and the cost of fuel, and that's going to be driven by natural gas. So when you focus in on our base rate, what we really have control over from a year-to-year basis. When we started this program, I came on board in 2013, and really all of the administration LP&L came on board shortly after that summer of 2013, where we all had so much fun out there talking about LP&L. But what this administration realized when we dug in is that for about 10 years, LP&L had really not done any work on their infrastructure at all. And in our business, you have to focus on reliability and affordable rates, but one can't completely take over the other. And so what we saw with our base rates is we saw in our total overall rate, but we saw that we were about $10 below the state average, which, unless you have a revenue stream or some reason why you're below, that should never be, because all electricity providers have similar costs. So we saw that we were about $10 below the state average. And we saw that we had about a $300 million infrastructure program that we needed to tackle. But in looking at that, we said we don't want to repeat the mistakes of our predecessors, where we went out and it just had a one-time increase and saw that spike. So we're going to break this off into smaller pieces and do it on a year-to-year basis, and every year re-justify it. And so we broke it up and we said we're going to do it so that we're going to adjust our base rate, which again is 30% of your total rate. We're going to adjust it 5.75%. Each year over 5 years, because that's going to equal, for our average customer, $1.90 a month. And so we're in year 4 of that program. And although this has been tough, I mean, it's been tough for our customers. It's been tough for us out there, in the grocery store and other places where people come up and saying, I don't understand why you're raising your rates. And we're constantly coming back and saying, it's because we need to tackle this infrastructure program. But in year 4 of this program, we see that we can now complete that program. And so with this budget, we are ending that program, and we don't see any base rate increases over, the foreseeable future. And as we end this program, we see that LP&L's electric rates are exactly right at the state surveyed average. And so we pulled them back in line with everybody else. So anytime you go through this program where you got to pull your rates back in line and you got to pay for big projects, you're going to go through a lot of what we've gone through, and it's necessary and it's appropriate. And you'll never hear me out there saying that, folks, shouldn't be frustrated, shouldn't be concerned about any type of a rate increase, because it's incumbent upon us to get out there, explain it, but also to realize that, I can say that it's $1.90 on somebody's bill, but it depends on how much you use. The average customer is based off somebody using 1,000 kWh. But if somebody uses 2,000 kWh, it's going to have more of an impact. But, looking at this summer, we've not had a rate, we always make those rate increases go into effect on October 1st.
Right.
So we haven't had a rate increase this spring, to that effect. But you're dealing with, in June, you had 22 days that were over 95 degrees. We had the one day that was 112. That's going to drive up consumption. And so, we're out there telling folks about how they can be more energy efficient. But we're also trying to get out there and communicate so that people that have issues with their bills and communicate with us, we're doing everything we can to make sure that meter reading and all of that is accurate, because that's another area that folks obviously have had a lot of concerns in terms of that petition.
Something you and I talked about, and we'll have to take the break here in just a couple of minutes, but something you and I talked about before we went on the air was if you compare this year to last year, there is an increase because there was a decrease last year in one particular area.
So the other half of our rates, that purchase power cost recovery, that 70% of our rate, that's going to be directly influenced by what our costs are from Xcel Energy. The cost of natural gas dropped last year. And so in not just past February, but the February before, because of our cost, we were able to lower that pass-through 18%. And we held it at 18% through the entire summer, which meant that pass-through portion of our rate was right at 5.8 cents, which is lower than it normally should be. Normally it should be about 6.8 cents. But it was 5.8 cents the entire last summer, and then went back to its normal level in October. This year, natural gas is up. It's up about, I wrote it down here, but it's up 33% over last year. And so our pass-through is 7.3 cents. So it's back to that, where it normally is. But for somebody that's comparing their total rate from last summer to this summer, they're going to see about a penny difference in terms of that total rate. And that makes a difference. But again, you got to understand that, natural gas is going to, and the cost of that is going to drive, what our cost is from our wholesale provider. And that's a straight pass-through. One thing we used to do before our administration came on board, they used to adjust that pass-through every month. They get the bill from Xcel and they just reflect it on the next month. And so you saw that 70% of our rate, it would fluctuate from month to month. And we've eliminated that. We've set that now. And so we try to set it on an annual basis. But if, in the February timeframe, if natural gas trends up, if we get dinged like we did by Xcel, and SPP for various different charges, we have to go back and adjust it. So we did have to adjust that in February of this year. But it's where it typically is, up from that kind of artificially low level last year.
We have to take the break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Matt Rose with LP&L. If you have a question, you can call in 770-5790, toll free 1-800-687-0790. When we come back, we'll talk about why LP&L's bills seem to be higher than other bills. Mm-hmm. We hear about that here on the show, so we'll talk about that. Your questions as well on the phones and via text. We'll be right back. All right, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM, KFYO. Matt Rose with LP&L in studio. And if you have a question, go ahead and give us a call, 770-5790, 1-800-687-0790. Before we get to the phones, I'll just throw this out there, because I'll get listeners who call in who say, hey, you know what, I live out in the county, mm-hmm. I'm on a different provider. My bill is half of what LP&L is. Mm-hmm. What do you say to those folks?
What I say is that LP&L's rates are almost identical to spec. I don't have what spec's current rate is, as we're going into it. But I do know that if you look back to May, spec was basically, we were 10.76 cents and spec was 10.54 cents. In terms of our rate per kWh. So we're right in line with spec.
Is that the base rate that's in
No,
line?
That's the total rate. That's all in.
So that's the pass-through, everything.
That's the pass-through, and that's the base rate, all in. And like I say, spec, they don't report their rates to the PUC like a lot of co-ops don't. So I don't know what their current rate is. I'm going to have to get out there and try to find some folks and look at their bills and try to decipher it, or call over there and say, hey guys, where are y'all at right now? But we're always right in line with spec. Now, the one thing that I always ask folks to do whenever they say that somebody on spec is half of what somebody on LP&L is, I always ask them two things. Number one, please look at what the consumption is on those two bills, because every house is different. And so if you're looking at the total overall cost, is your consumption more than theirs or vice versa? So make sure it's apples to apples. And then the second thing is just make sure you're comparing strictly the electric to the electric. A lot of time folks look at the bottom line with LP&L and they don't look at the fact that, many, many years ago, the city decided that they were going to put all of the city services on one bill. And that they were going to house the city's customer service department at LP&L. And so when you get your bill from quote-unquote LP&L, it's going to have the water department, it's going to have the City of Lubbock water, it's going to have stormwater, it's going to have wastewater and solid waste. The only component of that LP&L has any sort of authority on is the electric rates. We don't set water rates. That's the water department. The water department collects that revenue. It comes in on folks' bills, and then it separates out and it goes to different places. But one of the things that I talked to the mayor about, he talked about this a little bit in his deal that he put on Facebook, is that coming up here in a few months, we're rolling out a new package that's going to have a lot of customer service features on it. But one of the things is that we're rearranging that bill. We're making it a little bit more transparent than it already is, but we're also you're gonna see it come out and say City of Lubbock Utilities on it. And in the call center that is located at LP&L is going to be refashioned to City of Lubbock Utility Billing Department. And there's going to be an increased focus putting on when folks call in, really drilling down and saying, what is your area of concern and where can we get you to that person? Because I get it. I have friends of mine that I go to dinner with and they sit there and say, LP&L water's killing me with their rates. And I have to explain to them, look, we don't set the water rates. That's not any part of our business structure, but it does, the billing center is located at LP&L. And so we understand where that can be misconstrued, but we want to make sure that folks know that. But one area that we're continuing to work on, and I know that a lot of folks out there that have looked at that petition, signed the petition, or on social media or anywhere else have talked about, is the meter reading. And that is a function of that customer service department that's located at LP&L. And one of the things that we've pushed for and that we're pushing through in this budget right now are advanced meters. And we started that process last budget cycle in that we spent the last year gathering information. We put an RFP out in the spring because we've got to put in a new billing system anyways. It's over 16 years old, so we're putting that in, and then we're going to put in advanced meters. And the reason we're going to do that is, right now, the way that we read meters, We do it the way they did it about 30 years ago. That's about the relevant technology that we have in this city right now. South Plains Electric Cooperative has advanced meters. The vast majority of the state does. And what I tell folks all the time is that, right now, especially during the summer months, we're getting a lot of folks calling in saying, hey, I'm seeing a spike that's not natural, and a lot of it's on the water side. But at the same time, it's still those meter readers coming out of the customer service department at LP&L that are going out there and reading it. And so, we're making our folks work overtime. If folks call in, we're telling them, go back, reread that meter. If there's still something wrong, then the water department is going to send their folks out to test that meter. They'll pull it and test it. If they think there's a leak on the customer side of the meter, they're going to work with them. But until you implement the technology that allows you to take that human error out, you're going to have human error. And when you've got human beings walking up and down alleys, standing on the back of fences with binoculars trying to scope meters across yards versus having a meter that can have two-way communication, you're not going to have the accuracy that you want. And so that's what we're pushing for.
Let's go ahead and let's take a question. Let's first go to Wayne. Wayne, you're on with Matt Rose with LP&L.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard right earlier.
Yes, sir.
That we purchased all the electricity from Excel, right?
Yes, sir. In 2004, we signed a contract where the city buys 100% of its power from LP&L. From Excel. I'm sorry.
Well, and then no offense, but then why do we need LP&L? Why don't we just get it all directly from Excel and not have to pay all these pass-through costs?
Sure. So what you're referring to is retail competition, or in our case, SPS or XL Energy. They're the same company. There used to be alley by alley competition in Lubbock. Obviously it was before my time and my administration's time, but the city bought out XL's infrastructure here and became the sole provider. But XL Energy has a component where they are generators. They have a whole generation fleet where they sell wholesale electricity to folks all over the Southwest Power Pool. LP&L has, they have, some power plant. We have some power plants, but we don't have enough to generate for a full load. So I understand your point of saying, why don't you just buy straight from the wholesaler? But XL does not have a retail presence here in Lubbock. They used to have one, a past council and a past administration bought out that infrastructure. XL sold it out to them. They used to provide electricity for about 30% of the folks here in Lubbock. Yeah. That's no longer the case, and so now we're structured like Austin, San Antonio, Waco, Denton, and a lot of other folks. About 72 other cities in the city.
Hey, Wayne, thanks for the call. Appreciate it, Matt. I'm going to ask you to hang out for a couple more segments.
Absolutely.
But when we come back, if you're on hold, stay where you are. We'll continue to take your calls, your questions. Matt Rose with LP&L in studio. All right, Chad Hasty Show News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. Matt Rose with LP&L in studio, and we continue our discussion. Here a little bit, we'll talk about the future with ERCOT, because that's in the future for LP&L. It all kind of ties in together, so we'll get to that here in a little bit. If you have a question, though, we want to try to get to your questions. And you can call in 770-5790, 1-800-687-0790. And let's head to the phones. Daniel, you're on with Matt Rose of LP&L.
Yeah, I had a question. When was the last time LP&L actually generated power? And are we paying for upkeep of that facility? And if we are, why don't we just scrap it because we haven't been producing energy?
That's a really great question. And not to go too far back in history, but up until 1983, Lubbock generated all of its power on its own. And then starting in 1983, they started buying some power from XL's wholesale fleet and generating some. But it got to the point in 2004 where we were buying enough power from XL in piece that it made more sense to sign a wholesale contract and have a lower rate than it did to try to do both. And so at that point in time, we started buying 100% from XL, but our generation units existed to power the market in the region. So basically we had what were called unit contingent contracts, which meant that XL would call on our units to generate electricity when it was necessary in the region and then would pay us a rate for that. But our administration that came in 2014 or 2013 looked at it, and in one area in particular over at the Cook Station, we saw that it was not a good business decision to keep that unit running at full steam. And so we've actually mothballed that unit. And so we still run the Massengale unit, which is over there on I-27, and the Brandon unit, which is on the Tech campus, because that has a lot of benefit to Texas Tech. And the Massengale unit, again, is needed for the regional stability. But to your point, there may come a point in time where we have to look at our generation fleet and make those same decisions that we made about Cook. We review it on a monthly and an annual basis to make sure it makes sense for us to continue to do it, because, more and more cities are taking a look at this and saying, we don't need to be in the generation business. It doesn't make any sense. There's a high level of investment. There's a very high level of upkeep. And so, for the generation you have on call right now, surely maintain it as long as it makes financial sense. But beyond that, don't, because, as a municipal provider of electricity, your sole responsibility is affordable and reliable power. It's not necessarily to be out there investing in power plants, to try to make a revenue or take a loss. And so it's a really great question, and hopefully that kind of covered the history of it.
Sure.
Daniel, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Let's head back to the phones. And Gwen, you're on with Matt Rose of LP&L.
Hi, thank you. I was kind of wondering, how on earth do they manage to read the water meter? Because found out my water meter was underneath a bunch of leaves and dirt and everything.
Yes, ma'am. And we hear that all of the time. And what I can tell you is that, there's 104,000 electric meters for LP&L, and there's about 83,000 water meters for the city of Lubbock, and meter readers read both of those. We stress as much as we can accuracy on that, and they read all of those meters, but that does not mean that they don't make mistakes. And a lot of the folks that we're hearing from this summer are folks saying, hey, my water usage is not where it should be. And so we're sending folks back out there to reread it. I can tell you that, it is very common for those water meter boxes, because they are at ground level, to get filled during a month. I've walked those routes with meter readers a lot, and they walk through there with their kind of crowbar-like apparatus. They pull it straight up. They've got equipment that can quickly brush off just what they need to see, and they lay it back down. They don't clean out the meter boxes because it would take too long. If they get to a meter where they lift it up and they can't just quickly do it, then they'll sit there and brush it off and clean it out. But, what you see in your meter box a lot of time is the accumulation of dirt and leaves, bugs, and all sorts of things for months at a time, because our meter readers, on any given day are going to read, upwards of 1,000 meters on both sides of it, so they got to work quickly. But, it's kind of like I said about on the electric side, we're moving to advanced meters. I know on the city side, they're taking a look at moving advanced meters in water. I hope that they do that because of two reasons. One, your point, folks that are going out there looking at their meter box, they don't have a high level of confidence that somebody's been by there to read that. You still have human error. And, the other faction of it is, if it's not as prevalent on LP&L side on the electric side, but on the water side, if you do in fact come across a situation where you have a leak, you may not know about it, and you're not going to know about it until you get your bill in the mail at the end of 30 days. And if it is a mainline leak and you take it to the city's Water Board of Appeals, they've got a process to refund it. But if it is a sprinkler head that's broken, or if it's a leaky toilet, or it's anything like that, many times they're not able to refund it, and folks have to eat it. And that's, we got to get to a point in time where customers have, a quicker response, and they can see these things. Because, I dealt with an elderly woman just the other day on the water side of it that she had a leak. It was a hose in the backyard that had an irrigation hose that had broken. She had about 60,000 gallons worth of water that she had used, and she didn't know it until she got her bill, and it was 6 weeks later. If you'd had an advanced meter on there that has a leak detection system, it would have notified her immediately, and she could have gotten fixed. And so, the city's customer service department had to put her on a payment arrangement to get through that. And we've got to get to a point in time where we're more proactive than that. It doesn't make any sense. But I understand your concern, and we hear it all of the time. Just know that the meter readers for the city on the water side, they can go through there and clean that off pretty quickly without cleaning out that meter box. But I understand when you look at it and you say it doesn't look like it, but anybody's been here. I really do.
Gwen, thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Let me ask you this before we get back to the phones, because I've had people, and you've probably heard from people too, who have called in and said, hey, I keep my house at 77 degrees while I'm at home year-round, 77. Why the huge spike? Right. If it's at 77 or 78 the entire year, why is there a huge spike? Understand that there might be a little spike during the summer, but why the gigantic spike that they see?
Your air conditioning unit uses more electricity than anything else in your home as we move into the summer months. And so what I typically tell folks is think of your house like a box. Just think of a small box. If you want the air inside of that box to be 72 and the air outside of the box is 72, there's not much that needs to happen to keep that. But if the air outside the box gets to 100, how much harder is it to keep the air at 72 inside that box? And how many holes are there in the box? You know, how efficient is the cooling unit? All of those different things. And so we tell people that it is normal to see your consumption of electricity double or triple as we go to May to June to July, because that's how the temperatures outside progress. And so you need to be aware of that and do everything you can to be efficient and make sure that you're changing your air filters. You don't have, cracks in your doors or windows. You use blinds, you plant vegetation around your home, everything you can do to help out your AC, because that's what's pulling the most electricity. But you should see the same exact stair step where it goes up from May to June to July. You're going to see that same stair step down from, September to October to November. We call them the shoulder months in the industry. You shoulder up in the summer and you shoulder down in the wintertime. And that's the common trend. And, as we've been talking to folks a lot this last week, from this petition and other reasons, I was just down in Austin and I was talking with folks from Austin and a lot of different places, and they're all out there doing the same thing we are. There's a lot of media in Austin, El Paso, and San Antonio, and these different cities of folks saying the same exact thing. It's just, Texas summers are brutally hot, and you just need to be aware of that. And again, if you go to advanced meters, you can look at your electric usage in real time as you make that transition to summer. You can gauge over that kind of 6-week period as you transition. You can gauge to see how efficient you are, so it's not some sort of a jackpot when you get your bill at the end of the month. Yeah. But, we're not going to be able to have those fully deployed for another few years, probably 2 years to 3 years. So until that point in time, all we can do is get out there and tell our customers, be aware of this, and or else you're going to get a surprise. But if you do, call in. We've got payment arrangements that we will help you make. We've got a list of energy assistance agencies that are listed on our website, people we partner from Neighborhood House to Salvation Army, just across the board. But the thing we also tell folks is that, if you feel like you're going to have an issue, please get with us early, get with those energy assistance agencies early, and just get qualified, because they're going to have to do qualification on their end of it. But get qualified, and that way if you need it, you can call them and it's done. But if you wait till the last minute, it's hard for them to work that quickly and get you the funds necessary. So please get out there and communicate with us, and we'll do everything we can to help you. When we come back, we're going to talk about ERCOT. We'll also, if you have any questions, we'll try to get to as many questions on the phones as possible. Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. We'll take the break, and we'll be back here in just a few minutes. All right, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. I know a lot of people still have questions, and we'll try to get to those, but I want to get to ERCOT. That is the future for LP&L. Mm-hmm. That's where LP&L is moving, is it 2021? That's what we're working towards right now. How would moving to ERCOT play into what we're dealing with right now, or will it? Will it lead to lower rates? Will it lead to lower bill? That's what everyone's concerned about, lower bills. Yeah, we believe so. And so very, very quickly, where we are on all of that is that we've just wrapped up the study phase of this project. Understand that it is unique. Nobody like Lubbock has ever disconnected from the Southwest Power Pool and moved to ERCOT before. So the commission has taken this very seriously because they know it's going to set precedent. But we just finished up the study phase. The Southwest Power Pool and ERCOT finished up their studies. We're finishing up ours. We're going to proceed forward with what we're calling a contested case here probably in the next month. And it'll take probably until, the early of 2018 before the commission comes back and renders a verdict in terms of whether this is in the public interest. And so very quickly, for folks that don't know, the United States is cut up into a series of electric grids that all operate independently, all have their own operators and rules. And For us here in this region, you've got the Southwest Power Pool that Lubbock is currently hooked onto. Southwest Power Pool is a multi-state grid that goes all the way up to Canada. Texas has its own self-contained power grid called ERCOT. And so what we are attempting to do is disconnect from the Southwest Power Pool and connect to the ERCOT Power Pool so we can join the rest of the state. And we want to do that because the Texas legislature has done a lot of work with the PUC and ERCOT in order to make it the most competitive market in the world. And so what it allow us to do is it allows LP&L to shop all sorts of wholesale providers of electricity around the state of Texas. Right now in Southwest Power Pool, we can only buy power from somebody that can directly deliver it to us, which means the only person we can buy power from is XL. And so we're held captive on those costs. Moving over to ERCOT, we can buy power from anybody, and all of this wind energy that you see all around us is all primarily wind energy that is dedicated to the ERCOT market. And so we'll now be the first off-takers of that wind energy and be able to take advantage of it. Now, there is a deregulated market in ERCOT. In 1999, the legislature brought in deregulation of a portion of the market, went into effect in 2001. And basically what they did was they said all of the areas of the state that have investor-owned utilities, such as TXU, those companies need to unbundle. So they need to take their generation business and make it its own business, their wires business, make it its own business, and then their retail presence, make it its own business, all separate with a firewall. And then for that retail business, you'll have retail competition. As long as we're in the Southwest Power Pool, there is no competitive market in the Southwest Power Pool. As long as we're hooked up to SPP, we will operate exactly as we do today. Moving into the ERCOT market, our governing structure will remain the same. But if the legislature were to make the decision that they were going to go ahead and deregulate the municipal utilities like Austin, San Antonio, there's 72 of them. If they were to deregulate those, and if they were to deregulate the electric cooperatives, there's 75 of those like South Plains Electric Cooperative here. If they were to make that decision, then that would impact Lubbock. If they were to make that decision and we were still in SPP, we would not see that benefit. And so we see moving into ERCOT as something that we're going to be able to sign better wholesale contracts. That 70% of your rate, that is our cost of purchasing power, we think it's going to be substantially less than it is today in ERCOT. But all of the changes that the legislature makes to folks in Texas will now be subject to that as well.
We have to take the final break. When we come back, we'll wrap it up with Matt Rose of LP&L. All right, we have about 2 minutes left on the show, so I'm only going to have time for one more caller. Ross, you got to go in about 30 seconds, okay?
Hey, Matt, you made a huge misstatement about the Southwest Power Pool. It is absolutely not correct that the only utility you can buy power from is XL. Southwest Power Pool has a 2-day market just like ERCOT. The only difference is they have a capacity requirement. All LP&L would have to do is purchase capacity requirements from anybody in the Southwest Power Pool market.
Yes, that is true. However, there is a delivery charge that's associated with that capacity market that is substantial. You're right. You can do that. We could buy from folks in Nebraska. There are 3-cent deals in Nebraska right now. There's no question about that.
There's 3-cent deals in Oklahoma, too.
And there are. But the two biggest congestion points in the Southwest Power Pool, one of them is in the panhandle of Oklahoma, and one of them is directly above us in the north zone, and so in the southern zone. So you're absolutely right.
I'm very well aware of that. Those are going away as XL builds out their transmission.
Well, but that's still in question because as they announced with that big wind farm, I don't know what they're going to do with their generation fleet here in the panhandle region. I don't know what they're going to do with the toll plant up there. All of that's yet to be determined, and so we could still exist in the Southwest Power Pool. Don't get me wrong. And if we stayed in there, we could probably try to change some market rules and get it to be more favorable. But what I can tell you is that in signing that transition contract that we did, shoring up our fleet from 2021, that we beat the bushes and we went everywhere to try to figure out if there's somebody else that we could buy from, but we couldn't effectively do it. So you're absolutely right, but effectively we're stuck. One really quick thing I just want to throw out here, because a lot of the folks out there are talking about consumption, is that if you think there's something wrong with your bill, please call us. We will go out and reread the meter. We'll have the water department test. We'll do everything we can, but please communicate with us. Thanks.